Some content or topics discussed could trigger a past anxiety or be sensitive or disturbing to listen to or view. Please view and listen with caution. Hi, my name is Todd Bly-Levin. I'm one of the hosts of the Walking Tall podcast, and it's our mission to help all people that are down and depressed or dealing with some sort of trauma or mental health issue to learn how to stand back up and walk tall again in their lives. Please follow us on all of our social platforms, our YouTube channel, and check out our Walking Tall movement at www.walkingtallmovement.com. Now, here's our show.
Welcome back to Walking Tall. If you were with us last week, you heard us speak once again about the events in Highland Park, Nashville, Louisville, and Daleville, Alabama, and how they impacted us significantly and what they continue to teach us about ourselves. And if you've been with us for the entire season, you would know we typically go around the team to discuss last week's show, how it's impacted us, what are our follow-up thoughts, etc. But we're not going to do that this show because, frankly, we're just simply exhausted of talking about mass shootings. And we have one of our most amazing and exciting guests coming on who've had some great life experiences that we can't wait to share. So we're going to welcome Kyle Thousand to the show this week. And I first met Kyle Thousand, or KT as I affectionately know him, in 2002. Kyle transferred to the University of Iowa and joined the baseball program, becoming a teammate of mine. I immediately recognized in Kyle not only extreme athleticism and extraordinary baseball talent, but most importantly, he was extremely smart and was an intrinsically driven person, a natural leader on and off the field, someone the whole team looked to as an example, and someone I looked to as a resource. It certainly didn't surprise anybody when KT got drafted by the Toronto Blue Jays in the 26th round in 2003. However, it shocked everyone when he was quickly injured early into his professional career, ending his dream of playing in the big leagues. Kyle's early focus on his education throughout his life paid off as he went on to graduate in 2007 from law school at Creighton University. And then in 2011, Kyle was hired by Excel Sports Management and Casey Close as their first hire. And if you didn't know, Excel Sports Management and Casey Close are Derek Jeter's agent. To the surprise of nobody, Kyle excelled at Excel and then was hired by Jay-Z and Roc Nation, becoming the agency's first managing director of baseball, representing the likes of Sabathia and Robinson Cano. And after 7 years with Roc Nation, Kyle left the agency and is now the director of baseball operations at Milk and Honey, based out of Nashville, Tennessee. Milk and Honey is an entertainment and sports agency having some of the top talent in both industries. We are so lucky to have Kyle Thousand as a part of the Walking Tall movement, and let's welcome him to the show.
All right, admitting him in.
I like the ding dong. There he is. KT, welcome to Walking Tall. We just introduced who you are and what you've done and what you're doing to the listeners. But just wanted to say one more time, thanks for joining us. And we're so excited to have you.
Well, thanks for having me. And I will have to wait until the podcast comes out to see whether that was a favorable introduction or not. But looking forward to that.
All right, I did my best. I've known you long enough. I wouldn't do you wrong. So
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So as I was saying, I got to introduce you, and we've known ourselves. We've known each other for 21 years. I've known myself for 40. You've known yourself for longer. But yeah, we've known each other for a little over 20 years now, KT, and you've done just some amazing things, not only in the game of baseball and professionally, but in life. So if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about how we met and how you got to be where you're at and what life's provided for you.
Yeah. So, well, you and I met originally when I transferred into Iowa. We were teammates, and it's been so great to reconnect with you. We had a special team and a special group of individuals at the University of Iowa, and life happens, and you lose that connection that you once had that was so strong, and to be able to reconnect with you, in particular with what you're doing with Walking Tall, is incredible. And I couldn't be more supportive of what you and the three of you are doing. And but yeah, so I'm living in Nashville now, and after a short-lived professional career in baseball, I went to law school and was fortunate enough to get an opportunity after practicing law for a few years in Chicago to get into the baseball agency world. And I'm really excited to be able to say that, like, I now own, or a partial owner of, my own sports agency, and that's at Milk and Honey, which we're headquartered in Los Angeles, but me living in Nashville, which is just it's a nice change from living in New York for 12 years and Los Angeles for a few, and even Chicago before that. I'm living in the suburbs here in Franklin and loving life and getting back to my Iowa roots.
Yeah. It's funny, obviously, like I said, and we became friends and teammates through baseball. And part of my introduction, I said that, it wasn't a surprise to any of us when you got an opportunity to play professionally. Just, watching you develop as a player and as a person, somebody with your talent and your drive deserved that opportunity. But, frankly, it was saddening, when you got injured so quickly, cutting your career short. And I can't imagine, both you and Todd have played professionally. And when that comes to an end, whether or not you come to terms with it or not, and in our conversations offline, KT, you've talked about your affection for mental health and all areas of that. So, like, talk to us, like, when your playing career ended, how did you handle that transition from a dream not being realized to then moving on and now to another dream coming to fruition? But, that's challenging, and you and Todd could certainly relate to that. So Todd, chime in as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was a short-lived career. I originally, tore my labrum in my shoulder, and it was the game against Illinois right before we went to the Big Ten tournament, and tore my labrum throwing a guy out at third, and did the rehab. What was that, in 2002? Did the rehab and was able to play and play well in 2003, and fortunate enough to get drafted. And I was warming up, taking infield, outfield, single A ball, and, was just throwing to third once again, coincidentally, and retore it. And back then, labrum repair surgery was like a 50-50 chance of fully recovering and healing. And they wanted me to continue to play and have the surgery, but I knew, the business side then was, that's going to be at least a year, and there's going to be another draft class. And I had to make the tough decision of, law school was always going to be my backup plan regardless. And, being a 26 round pick, it wasn't like I was, their star player or anything that they were drafting that year and giving me a couple $1 million in a signing bonus. So, I did the math a little bit and, figured that, I would be best suited to hang up the spikes and go to law school and see what happened from there.
Yeah. And Todd, talk a little bit how you can relate to KT. Obviously, you've talked already on earlier episodes. I think in our guilt conversation, you talked significantly about maybe a little bit of regret or self-doubt of, did you do everything to further your career? And so, talk to us a little bit how that resonates with you.
Yeah, I think, number one, what I really liked about, your story, KT, and I wish, there was more education on players that do get the opportunity to sign and play professionally, to have a backup plan. Number one, a lot of us go into it and you don't really have a backup plan because you see yourself standing at Yankee Stadium in the bottom of the ninth, if I'm on the mound and I'm striking Derek Jeter out, which one of the greatest players of all time. In fact, quick story on Jeter before I go back into this. I'm at the All-Star game when it was at Target Field, and I was in the Hall of Fame booth with my dad and Ricky Henderson and all these amazing, great legends of the game. And Derek Jeter took the field for the last time in his All-Star game, and every single one of those gentlemen stood up and applauded for him. And I had never seen them do that for any other player at any other event I'd been to. And it just shows the true character of what Jeter did. But going back to the route of being able to have an understanding of what you're supposed to do. And you play with a lot of guys. I mean, I connected with one last night. As a matter of fact, he lives in Guam. So I've got a buddy in New Zealand. that played on the same age organization that I played with that rookie ball season. This guy, Keith, is in Guam. We're all connecting and we're talking about stories of when we used to play. But you think about all the players that have really struggled coming out because they didn't have a plan. So you had a plan. The guys that had a plan have now worked in their same careers, maybe for 26 plus years, and have had some sort of happiness in their life. And the guys that don't have really struggled through their depressions. I know in my story, I played 7.5 years of pro ball, bounced all over the place, and had a lot of fun. But it came to that point where you were at really quick saying, all right, am I wanting to wait another year because there's a whole new wave of prospects coming up? What are my expectations? What are my realizations? And of really kind of sticking to the game. And, my dad played for 23 years. And so I got to follow him around, running behind him or riding a bike behind him, and him always saying, hey, there's always another wave of people coming up wanting to take my job. But you got to be super talented to get to that level, to stay for that long. And to have the realization like you had where you're going to separate, I thought was really brave and courageous and mature, to be able to hang them up. But there's still a point when you do hang them up, you're depressed.
You have I don't anymore, but as I was going through it as an attorney, and even when I was still in law school, it's like that what if moment, right? Like what if I would have had that surgery and continued to play? I could still swing a bat when I did it, and they wanted me to just stick on to be a DH, right? And then get the surgery in the off season. And I was just, recognizing the, again, the business of baseball and understanding that next wave coming through. And we were already in the top 1% of baseball players in the United States, right, Todd? As far as being able to get drafted and, have that opportunity, but there's a lot of talented individuals out there that do make it, that you just, you compare and contrast the situation. And it wasn't an easy decision for sure, but, and there were other variables involved in that decision, but at the end of the day, I valued education and knew that I could do something that I would still enjoy outside of baseball. And that's kind of what happened,
And the exit strategy, super quick, Chris, I think it's important. The exit, that when you're told you're gonna leave, whether you make that on your own, there's no communication from the organization standpoint, whether you're in the military or whatever that long-term career goal is. There's never a comeback to where it's 30 days, 60 days, 90 days later to check on you and see where you're at. Or there's never some sort of exit. When you leave a corporate career, you get some sort of compensation most of the time, if you're lucky, or you get insurance, where in baseball, man, you're done. I think that's also kind of very cutthroat. Did you have to go through that?
Yeah, I still remember it clear as day after I left my manager's office and, told my teammates, and they kind of looked at me like I was crazy. And because to your point earlier, most of them didn't have a backup plan. This was it, right? And then I just, knew that the writing was on the wall. I've basically torn everything you can possibly tear in your arm, and it's all from throwing a baseball, right? I was a pitcher until my sophomore year of college. Well, I did both, but I tore my UCL, but fortunately enough, it was a ribbon tear to where I didn't need to have Tommy John surgery. And that was when I was at Iowa State, and then they dropped their program because of Title IX. And that's why I, transferred over to Iowa. And Mal, I don't even know if you know this, I was an invited walk-on for the football team there.
Yeah, I remember.
I didn't think that baseball was in the cards for me anymore. And so I go to Iowa, and, we're in fall ball that first year. And I was like, I can still play the outfield and throw a baseball. So that was kind of how it transpired for me. But yeah, it's the mental aspect of it And making that decision was extremely difficult. And back then you really didn't have any guidance, or, there wasn't really a focus on mental health, particularly with athletes, but even in general. And it was, like I didn't know if I was making the right decision or not. And I struggled with that for a while.
Yeah. And Dr. LaRosa, you have a similar experience going on in your own house right now. We've talked a little bit on the show with your son Vito, and obviously Todd and I have seen footage and him play, and he's a really good player. But he has, some things going on physically that are really not allowing him to participate in the game. And, from your perspective as a mother, but also as a professional and in understanding the brain, like what types of things do folks like the three of us? Obviously my career ended earlier than I wanted it to as well when I graduated college, and obviously Todd and KT too. So talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing in your son, and obviously how the brain works through these types of circumstances.
Well, there's a really cool theory of intelligence. It's called the multiple theories of intelligence, put forth by Howard Gardner, where he talks about 12 different types of intelligences. One of them is bodily kinesthetic. Bodily kinesthetic intelligence is a person's ability to understand how their own body moves through space and time. It includes elements of timing. It includes elements of manipulating objects. It includes the ability to make adjustments to your own body mechanics at the drop of a dime. Okay, so as you all know, much more in depth than I do, these are skills necessary for a player at your level, all of you. Ever since my son was a baby, I've seen these skills. And while I knew he was an intelligent person, I knew that on Gardner's bodily kinesthetic measure that he was off the charts. I mean, he was hitting a free, thrown ball at 1.5. I mean, he's just always had the ability. Every coach has ever said that he can make adjustments being just told or shown something one time. He can adjust rapidly to different pitches that are thrown to him. And he's a person that works constantly and enjoys so much how his brain and how his body work together. Now, when you have that sort of skill set and you have that ability, I am certain from seeing my son and, hearing what the three of you have experienced, that there is a high that can come off of that. When your body can move that way, and when you can understand how your own body learns by simply manipulating itself through space and time, that is a skill that not really very many people have at that level, right? So when you live your life and you have a self-esteem and a self-perception and self-efficacy that all derives from that very, very, very special set of high-level skills, it's extraordinarily difficult when something happens to interfere with that. So my son, his first experience was when he was about 9 or 10, broke his wrist snowboarding, and he was all casted up. And we went to an amazing orthopedic surgeon here, Dr. Dagley on the North Shore of Long Island. And my son just went in and got right behind the desk and looked at the films and was pointing stuff out. And the questions were just rapid fire, to Dr. Dagley. And he said, kid, I think you have a future in this someday. You kind of have a real understanding of what's going on here. And he said, well, I'm going to be a baseball player, but that's really interesting too. So he's always thought about that as his mental love, but his physical love is baseball and track and football and any other sport, that he can play. So as of late, he's 16 and he's got a lot of stuff on the list now with college recruiting, and some coaches have wanted to see him and different things like that. But he's been injured for 2 months. He has a heel injury, and I've seen him shut down. His grades have dropped. He's isolated in his room. He hasn't wanted to talk to any of his friends. And I see I see what's happening mentally, and I see the depression setting in, and I'm prone to depression as well. And he's a 6'4" boy clone version of me cognitively. So I worry about, the fact that I'm prone to depression, and I see this happening with him. So I am constantly telling him, hey, listen, this is practice. However far you go in this career that you want, you can experience things like this. You'll experience setbacks. You'll experience injuries, things that are really going to get you down, but you have to work on that side of yourself. That's a strength that you need to develop. And honestly, he's coming back. Like, he's developed a variety of training activities that we do here at home. If you see a bruise on my face, that's because I was hit in the face with a ball. I'm pitching him like eight buckets of training golf balls that he came up with this thing where with these training golf balls.
Love
And he's
it.
using this metal stick that's the same diameter as the ball. And so I'm throwing it and he's just slamming them all over the house, and I'm all bruised up, but it makes him happy. And this is what's bringing him back to life. He's working on his load. He's working on all the things that he feels that he wants to be ready to do when he does go back in action. So on a different scale, on a totally lesser scale, because he's nowhere near any of you have reached in your careers. He only dreams and hopes to be there someday. I can understand, with a God-given natural bodily kinesthetic high level of intelligence, how it must feel when those things are temporarily taken away from you. And the ability to reframe your life, as you all have, and go forward and be so successful and turn those strengths into opportunities to use elsewhere in the fields of sports and other kinds of things, is a testament to Walking Tall. And what we try to tell our listeners, and what we try to tell people each and every time we get together, is that life is going to knock you down. It's going to knock you way down, and the more examples that we can give people of people who are in high level situations, who are knocked down, who build themselves right back up again and did something that inspired them to live a great life, that's what we're here to tell. So thank you so much, Kyle, for sharing that story today.
Yeah. And, it's funny. While we, as grown men, both Kyle and Todd and myself, all three of us, frankly, can relate to your young teenage son in the field of athletics. Some experiences that your son may not have had that somebody like Kyle has is in the professional world. And, I got to see firsthand and be impressed myself with what Kyle's doing professionally. I flew out one time to New York City to visit with him and got to walk through Roc Nation's offices and sit on the gold couch and do all those fun things that members of Roc Nation get to do. So Kyle, why don't you kind of, fast forward a little bit, talk to us about some of your experiences professionally and what those professional experiences allowed for you to do personally in your personal life, and maybe some hurdles that you've had to overcome on both ends of that spectrum as you've grown into the man you are today.
Yeah. So, it's funny because, when I was done playing baseball, I went to law school, and, all my closest friends were like, "Oh, you're going to do this to go be a baseball agent." And I was like, "No, like that's not what I want to do." Ultimately it's like, this job, it provides, a fun, different life than most have. But at times it can be glorified babysitting, right? Like, and so when I got the opportunity, it actually came through my law school roommate right out of law school, went to, go be groomed to be a basketball agent. And fast forward 4.5 years later, after I was a lawyer in Chicago, he calls me up out of the random blue and says that, my mentor, Casey Close, who was the former head of baseball at CAA, was leaving there to start a baseball division at that agency. And he wanted to set me up with a meeting with him. And I went to New York on a Friday and met with him for about 4 or 5 hours and spent the weekend with my buddy. And, by that following Wednesday, I had a job offer, and 2 weeks later, I was moving from Chicago to New York. And that's how it all started for me. And we had a great run at that agency, and then, was fortunate enough to progress in my career from just being, an agent to being the head of baseball at Roc Nation. And I mean, I'm from Iowa, and but I'll say that I grew up listening to hip hop, right? Like, Jay, Tupac, Biggie, all those guys. And I think it kind of surprised, Jay and the rest of the people at Roc Nation. And it was just like a great natural fit. And again, it was like a progression in my career and, had a lot of great experiences there, concerts, being backstage at concerts, meeting incredible people, which was also a very valuable tool to be able to recruit and, sign new clients. That run ended and was kind of on my own for about 18 months. But during that 18 months, I was trying to find, the right partners to start my own agency and be able to be an equity owner in it, which is something I didn't have previously. So was fortunate enough to meet the guys at Milk and Honey. I met them through one of the minority owners of the New York Yankees that I'm good friends with, and we started talks, and I think it was like July last year, and we got this deal done in December, and yeah, we're beyond excited and full steam ahead with what we're trying to do to build a multi-sport agency. And we've got a football division, and we're starting this baseball division, and we're looking at opportunities to expand beyond that in other sports as well.
Yeah, I think I can attest to the fact that you've had some pretty cool experiences. I've seen some pictures, most recently from you being at the Grammys, I think it was, with who was it? I got a photo of you and Machine Gun Kelly.
Yeah.
I got a photo of you and Dave Grohl. I mean, these photos are coming into my phone, and my jaw's dropping, right? I'm like, man, I want to be Dave Grohl. What about me, right? But one thing, I want to just touch on, and we talked about, both personally and through Walking Tall, your experience of, your relationships and things like that, and being in the public eye, and obviously somebody of your connections and living the life that you've been afforded. As you said, you're going to meet some high level people, you're going to develop relationships with them, you're going to be in the media. So talk to us about, some of how that's developed in your personal relationships, and what, struggles or opportunities that's provided you as well.
Yeah, I mean, the business I'm in, it's all about relationships and who you know. I get a lot of, whether it's messages on LinkedIn or DMs and Instagram, or just, friends of friends asking if I can speak to their son or whoever about my journey. It's, the number one thing I say, it's just about who you know, and to meet as many people as you can, and you never know where the conversation is going to go. And I think a lot of people, maybe are uncomfortable with, going, by themselves to like a conference, or like to the winter meetings. A lot of college kids, I tell them, like, the best way to find a job in baseball is to put yourself out there at the winter meetings, right? And try to connect with whoever you can in the lobby. Everybody in baseball is there, right? And Todd, this, like, it's a great place to connect and meet new people, but more importantly, you just, if that's what you ultimately are trying to do or accomplish, it's about finding or not finding, but it's about having the ability to be social and communicate, and put yourself out there. And for me, I was fortunate enough that I just knew the right person in my law school roommate to get into this. But since then, I've put myself out there in a lot of ways to connect with as many people as possible in this business. And it's extended beyond baseball for me. I've got a couple of great mentors that are not even in the business of sports, but have done incredible things in their careers. And it was just me, whether it was a cold email or call or whatever, that ultimately got me to having a meeting, and eventually being, for instance, one of my biggest mentors is a guy by the name of Duncan Niederhauer, and he was a former CEO of the New York Stock Exchange. That was while I was out in New York. And the lessons I learned through just getting to know Duncan was some of the biggest lessons I've learned in life and in business. And it's about the relationships you cultivate for yourself, but you got to have the motivation to go out and do that.
Yeah. And I think, no matter what our experiences are in life or the opportunities that are afforded us professionally or personally, right? We're all subjected to, and we're all have the capability of having adversity thrown our way. And I think, Kyle, you witnessed that most recently, right? Obviously you mentioned Milk and Honey being out in Nashville and, those types of environments that you're now in. But I think we've spoken about offline too. We all know, and we've talked about last week on our show, the event that happened in Nashville and how that community was rocked, and how through that, you and our listeners should know you and I have stayed in touch all throughout the last 20 years, but we really became a little more close due to my experience in the parade in Highland Park. But now you living in Nashville and seeing how an event such as a mass shooting can, really upend a community. And even for somebody like yourself who may not be directly related to the circumstance, some of those emotions, it can kind of rile up for you. So, talk to us about how, somebody in your experience still has opportunity for adversity and how you overcome it and what you've been experiencing as of late with the Nashville circumstance.
Yeah, I mean, obviously with what happened in Nashville, I have, some very close friends of mine were friends of family that was impacted. They lost their 6-year-old daughter, and, just an awful tragedy. And after, hearing, and getting to really reconnect with you and what you experienced in Highland Park, and, I was in tears listening to Todd's story, and you guys had a previous podcast where he went into detail about his experience. And it's just, it's unacceptable to me of what's going on and how many mass shootings like this are really happening. And, when you and I first started talking about Walking Tall, and, you connect me with Todd, it just really resonated with me. But that was prior to Nashville. And when, the thing, the event happened in Nashville, it affected me even more, to the point where I really wanted to figure out how I can help with your guys' movement first and foremost, but also how can we help others who have experienced, tragedies like you guys have. And, the community here was really affected. You really saw. And I joke about this, and I'll make it light for a second. I lived in New York for 12 years, and it hardened me as a person. I'm from Iowa, like I'm like the good old Iowa boy, and grew up with got an incredible family and whatever. But when I went to New York, it hardened me. And I moved to Nashville, and people here are so nice. Like I'm not even kidding. Like,
Where did you live?
I've not met a bad person here in Nashville. Like, people drive the speed limit, people hold doors for you, people, it's just like, it's nothing.
That's tough. That's tough, Kyle.
Like, when something like that happens here, I've just been able to witness a community wrap their arms around people that were affected. And it's a really inspiring thing, and what you guys are doing, and what you guys experience and what you're trying to do to help others to walk tall. It inspired me, and that's why I'm here right now.
Yeah, we can't thank you enough. Yeah, Dr. LaRosa, go ahead, please.
No, I just was going to say thank you, and I was going to say that regardless of where these shootings happen, they weigh very heavily on us. And for people such as ourselves and millions more, when we turn on the TV and we see some tragic situation like this occurring, we stop, we grieve, we feel, and it changes our emotional state for however long. With regard to the recent Alabama shooting at the Sweet 16, there was a young man that was just crying crocodile tears, saying he wished he could have pulled his friend out. And this young man saved his younger sister, who was celebrating her Sweet 16, an innocent, beautiful family day. You hear things like this. How could it not break your heart? How can it not drag you down? For 2 days, I found myself just saying, I just don't feel good. I just don't feel good. That's what my grandmother used to say. My grandmother had anxiety. Now she was in her late 80s, but I would call her up and I would say, how you doing, grandma? And she would say, I just don't feel good. I just don't feel good. What is it? Your heart, your leg, your eye, your foot, what is it? I don't know. I just don't feel good. I just don't feel good. And it's truly anxiety, and it does change our neurophysiology when we come across people suffering like that and going through things like that, even once, but as frequently as they're happening, it's a lot for people to take. And so we want to do something about it as much as possible, and the mental health effects that we're all suffering as a nation, as a world.
Yeah, and Todd, you and I speak a lot about, our experiences when new events occur and how it kind of gets us back to where we once were. And, obviously we talked about Nashville and the recent incidents in Louisville and Alabama and even my lockdown situation in Highland Park and how it really impacted me. But, talk to us how you're doing. Obviously this last month, we talked about it last week too, but hearing Kyle, talk about how it's impacted him, what resonates with you about that, Todd?
Yeah, I mean, it's all just sad, right? It's all extremely pulling. It's hard to cope with. You go back to 9/11, unfortunately, when all those thousands of people lost their lives in a tragic terrorist event in New York, and you saw how the world wrapped their arms around everybody in that city and anybody that was affected on a global level. And really, I can't think of another tragedy that kind of led up to that type of support again, and other than what I was in Las Vegas. And having 58 people die that night, and over 800 be injured, and the mass tragedy that sparked there, and the rally around community, around Las Vegas, Nevada, the whole West Coast. I was getting calls from people in England, like globally, just everywhere, rallying around support, which is great. But then it's short-lived, right? Then you're kind of left out by yourself, and you're trying to figure out how you're supposed to deal with this next step. And recently, obviously over the last probably couple of years, but more importantly over the last really 6 months, we're hearing way too much of these mass shootings. And whether it's in a Walmart or a poor school, and it's anybody that's being caught in the fire of this. And KT, when you called, man, my heart just dropped, and it dropped for those poor people, because number one, when you've been in an experience like that, directly, a firsthand experience in a situation where you've had to turn and run for your life or be impacted, you're automatically transported into that moment, regardless of where you're at. You're in that school with those poor kids. You're in that Walmart with those poor people that are hearing the gunfire and not knowing what the hell they're supposed to do and where they're supposed to go. And it's super tragic, and it's pulling, and it's sad, and you can feel it, and you're just praying to God that everybody's going to be okay, and everybody's going to get out of there alive. And then when you hear that there was death, and there's people that are not going to be able to embrace those poor children when they come home from school, and that last conversation they had with their children or their wife or their boyfriend or girlfriend or their friend before their life was taken away tragically, it's really hard. It's hard to deal with. And, if we're not, as a society, and I'm so proud of you, KT, for being open enough to realize that even though you're indirectly involved, you're affected, and you had the courage enough to be able to talk and share your vulnerability, which is what we need to do in these times. We need to be there for each other. And, if we can get ahead of some of this mental confusion, get ahead of bullying, get ahead of some of the reasons why these dumbass people make these decisions to pull the trigger, then maybe we'll end up seeing a decline. But until that happens, the community outreach is so important. And I encourage everybody, the community of Nashville, to not just let this go for, because it's been 2 weeks or 30 days. And I know we're going to get probably in a show where we're going to talk about grieving and we're going to talk about anger and all these things. But what can we do as a Walking Tall movement to rally? And you brought up network, right? Through just the four of us alone and the network that we have and the outreach and all the people that are coming on now, what can we do? What kind of message can we share with people to walk tall, be strong, not just for yourself, but for others that are in need every single day? And it's not just from a mass shooting. It's depression, it's anxiety, it's marriage, it's weight loss, it's whatever that is, it's just pulling you. But the tragedy that you had to go through, I'm really sorry, number one, you had to go through that and you're going through that. And the man that you are and stepping up to, you mentioned, something in privacy to me, just about how you could possibly give back and help that family. And I thought, man, here's a guy, like, you don't have to do that. And you're not doing it to put your name in a paper. You're not doing it to enhance your business. You're doing it because of who you are inside. And that's who we need more of in this world, right? We need more people to step up for those that need help. So, yeah, it's really tragic. Social media plays a big part in it. The minute that happens and you're hearing about it live, but
yeah,
just sad.
And when Nashville occurred, I think I was on spring break with my family, right? And my phone was ringing, and it was Todd, and then it was Kyle, and then it was Kyle, then it was Todd, right? And I knew something wasn't right. So I went and answered the phone, and Kyle and I had a quick conversation, and I made sure everybody was okay and he was doing well. And I got back to my family at the water park in the Dells, and I was crying. And my wife's like, "Were you crying?" And I said, "Yeah, of course I was crying." And she didn't know what happened. She didn't understand what the conversation I was just having. Because, regardless of whether I was there, like you had mentioned, Todd, in Nashville, in that school or in that church or in that movie theater or in that parade or in that concert, like, I'm there, because of my experience, I'm there. I could feel, I could smell, I could touch, what those poor people are going through in any of those environments, because being one in myself, you immediately put yourself back there. And that's, we talked about triggers and we've talked about these types of things. And, but what stood out most, which really made me feel good, and to keep it light, like you said, KT, and proved to me to a degree that Walking Tall is working and resonating with people, is Kyle, you knew who to call. You knew right away that, hey, Todd and I were here for you, and we're here for anybody else in Nashville for that matter. And that's what we're about. And I want to say thank you for allowing us to be that resource for you. It's important.
Yeah, and again, it wasn't like I was directly affected by this at the end of the day. It was just being a person that's new to this community, that was indirectly, in knowledge of what kind of transpired and who was affected. It was like, that's why I called you guys, right? Like, it was immediate, like, what can we do as a movement, and what you guys are trying to accomplish to right what's going on in the world, in particular here in the United States,
Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done. And, we're hoping that, with Walking Tall, it's just one small piece, but we're just one small piece. We recognize that there has to be a lot more good in the world to be done. Dr. Losa, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick reflection, to put this simply, and I know we're running a little low on time. Depression, anxiety, they have a memory. They're a bit cumulative without going into the full science of that. And when we are affected by these tragedies, I mean, we know, as we talked about on our triggers episode, that a trigger is a stimulus of any kind that kind of reminds a person of a traumatic experience, and they could be a variety from a variety of sources. But when a person lives their life, just taking the normal everyday blows that the human being and the human condition is prone to take, we break down over a period of time. I'm different at this age than I was at 20. I've experienced a lot more loss, a lot more tragedy, a lot more things, and so I find myself, when I'm hearing your stories, when I'm seeing the tragic, not just mass shootings, tragic events that surround us on a daily basis. I always say I just don't want to watch the news, but then I feel like, who am I just to shut it off and live my life blindly, And then I know that the effects of hearing these things can weigh people down. That there are times where I have to take 15 minutes and just cry in the shower, like every other day, and these are things that they exist. I'm a human being. Yes, I'm a psychologist and I've been trained in a variety of ways, but I'm human and I have a very large amount of empathy. And it's very difficult for me not to put myself in the position of suffering people and to an extent, imagine what they're feeling and experiencing. And there's a price and a weight that comes with that way of thinking, and so I think that, the point is really just to always, as we say on the show, keep your mental health in check, give yourself check-ins and tests and understand where you are, mentally periodically, so that you don't slip too far and you don't even realize that you're in a place where you've needed help for 5 or 6 months and didn't get it. It's easy. It can happen to the best of us. It happens to, many people around us. And it's just something that we always have to keep questioning. We do it for our physical selves. We say this all the time. I have a pain here. My chest hurts here. I have frequent headaches. We go get it checked out. We have to do the same thing with our mental health.
Yeah. And Todd, what about, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're so right. And, it's all about support too. And the support that you build around yourself when you feel like something's down. And it's making sure that you're finding those people that you can relate to that have been in that situation, no matter what type of mental health you're talking about. But when you get to that rock bottom place and it becomes quiet, you're in a bad place. And when you feel like you're alone or you're just separated from society, nobody else can understand. There are people that can understand what you're going through, because unfortunately we've had violence and craziness in our human being for thousands of years. There are people that can understand what you're going through. It doesn't mean you need to get over it or you need to hurry up and fix yourself. But you just need to be able to have the courage enough to open yourself up and be vulnerable. And some of the toughest men and women I know in the world are vulnerable and they're not afraid to ask for help. And we have our rocks and you got our support system. That's the biggest thing, man. I can't tell you, since we started this show, I've been talking to, Marines, SEALs, some of the craziest, most unbelievable people that do the most unbelievable things that are opening up to me over a phone call. And we've known each other for a while, but I'm learning more about them than I've ever known because of what we're doing with Walking Tall. And we're just giving people an opportunity to build more support around themselves so you're not alone. And the same applies in anything, right, KT, with whether you're playing and your days are done, you're not alone. People have done that. Reach out to one of your buddies and just talk to them about how they got through things, because how we deal with our own adversity, Chris, I think you shared it the first time, that how we deal with our own adversities and how we lift ourselves back up can be someone else's survival guide. Mm-hmm. So I think it's awesome.
Yeah. And I think what it's taught me, as we've gone and progressed in this show and our movement and we're meeting other folks, no matter your profession, no matter your life experiences, no matter your finances, no matter whatever situation you have, we're all prone to mental health issues and we're all prone to adversity and we're all prone to, a mass shooting for that matter too. Right. So I think, moving forward, the way I've chosen, and I know the three of you as well, is live life to the fullest and do with each day as much as you can, because you don't know when it'll be your last. And like I always say, and KT, I'll give it back to you as we start to wrap up, just be a good person. And I think at the end of the day, if you could put your head on your pillow knowing that you were a good person and you did everything you can that day to change the world and make it a better place, while also meeting your own objectives and goals and initiatives as a person and a professional, then you could sleep well. But if not, I think that that's where we can make changes. And so KT, I want to say thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for sharing in this movement with us. Thank you for valuing mental health as much as you do. You know, you've lived such a cool life, I want to say, and you've done some really great things. And I can't say, you know, I'm just proud of you. I'll just leave it at that. You know, we've known each other a long time. It's been an honor to call you a friend. It's even been a bigger honor to get to know you more closely as of late through Walking Tall. But thanks for being vulnerable and thanks for being here.
I appreciate it. And, you know, I really am proud of you as well. And the three of you really, and what you guys are trying to accomplish and do. And, you know, mental health goes well beyond, you know, a mass shooting, right? Like it could be anything in anybody's life, whether, you know, it's a divorce or it's, you know, a loss of a close one, or just, you know, everyday life at the end. Everybody is struggling in some capacity, or you don't know if they're struggling. And, you know, I always, you know, try and check up on my close friends, just no matter what, right? Because you just don't know what people are dealing with. And, you know, even in sports, right? Like it's starting to become prevalent, but it's just not to where it should be still. You know, I think, you know, it started with Michael Phelps and him coming out and starting to be an advocate after what he had, what was that, back in like 2016 or something, where, you know, he just gotten through his second DUI and understood he was super depressed despite being the most decorated Olympian of all time. And, you know, it goes well beyond that. There's so many athletes there. And, you know, I think, you know, Kevin Love, for instance, had a panic attack on the court one time. And, you know, he started I don't know if it's like a program for high schoolers in helping them with their mental health. It goes well beyond in so many different facets in just everyday life that, yeah, it's just being nice to someone, you know, and I'll come full circle. It's like,
That's right.
living in Nashville, it's just like everybody's nice to each other here. It's like, this is really
All right, Kyle, I'm gonna start to take offense to that.
Yeah, you gotta know, you got a New York girl there. You know that, KT.
I know. Listen, like
That's what I'm saying. Where did you live? We live in
I lived in Manhattan for 12 years. It's just, it's not that, like,
a tough crowd.
no, and listen, like, there's a stigma with New York, and particularly Manhattan, in my opinion, where, you know, people are not good people or mean or whatever. And I would always say, no, it's like basically Manhattan's all transplants regardless, but like, you know, it's not that the people hardened me. It was just living in New York that hardened me overall, right? Like it's the hustle. It's like, you know, it's just a constant go. And it changed me to a certain respect personally, like as a person, to where I just didn't have the patience, or I didn't really want to deal with people sometimes, right?
I hear that. I get
like,
it.
You know, my buddy, yeah, that's what it was. It was like my buddy had a doctor's appointment the other day, and like he couldn't drive, and I was like, I'm coming to get you, you know, like, I don't know if I lived in New York, I was like, oh man, I got a meeting, man. I can't do no.
That's a 3-hour round trip.
Right.
True. I remember when I moved to, I went to school in Southern Illinois University, the Salukis, in Carbondale. So I lived in New York my whole life, and I went there. It was my PhD program. So I wasn't like a young college student. And I went there, and I remember I had to stop at Starbucks, which was in a Barnes and Noble, to get my coffee because I had like a 19-hour day ahead of me. And I'm there, and it's a big, huge store, and there's not a single person in the store. And I'm just waiting online. My class is starting, and the girl is just, doing whatever she's doing, and I'm just waiting. And then finally, after, I guess what I felt was like 15 minutes, it was probably 2 because I'm from New York. I was like, excuse me, and she's like, give me just a second, as if there was 1,000 people surrounding her. And I'm looking all around thinking, what the heck am I missing? There's no one here. And it took her about 20 minutes to get my
down.
And I was so stressed out. My heart was pounding, and I'm like, just breathe. I was late for class. It was just, so it took me a while to kind of, change my pace a little bit and sort of understand a different lifestyle. And I can't say that I've ever really accomplished that, but
Todd, you said it best, as we wrap up, and we've had a lot of great guests on this show so far. We've had a tremendous law enforcement presence, military presence. Now we have one of the top baseball agents in Major League Baseball. But what I think what's resonating most with me is, and should for all of our listeners for that matter, is mental health affects us all. No matter our professions, no matter our paths, no matter our experiences. You don't have to be in a mass shooting. You don't have to be a baseball agent. You don't have to be in the military. You don't have to study the brain like Dr. LaRosa. We all have mental health hurdles, and above all else, we're here for you and we're here for each other. So, with that being said, KT, I'll let you one more time talk a little bit about Walking Tall, and then we'll sign off before we turn it to next week.
No, first and foremost, I'm so supportive of what you guys are doing. Really appreciate you guys having me on. This has been a lot of fun for me. And more importantly, it's just about spreading the word and what you guys are trying to accomplish with this. Mental health, it's becoming more and more prevalent every day, and there's still a stigma around it, and it's not necessarily a positive stigma. It's like, if you're struggling with something, people will just, say toughen up or whatever, but go find that therapist. And, what you guys are trying to accomplish with some other things and other aspects, it's just really enlightening for me. And, again, congrats to you guys, and also, to be where you're at now after what you guys have gone through is just, it's incredible. And I don't know if I could honestly do it, given, your guys' stories. And, it just really resonates with me with what you guys are doing. And like you said, it's in all aspects of life. It's just it's not just in one category. And I see it more and more with athletes these days. And it's what, we as Milk and Honey are trying to do and accomplish, is to make sure, whether it's our athletes or our musicians that we represent, it's like, it's the check-ins. It's just being able to check in on that person and making sure everything's all right. And if they're not, being there to help. So, and that's what I see, I see this being very successful for you guys, and I'm here to help in any way.
Thanks. And Todd, I know you wanted to say something real quick. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, KT. It really means a lot. I know that, in today's culture, our hopes is that some of that changes, right? That you might actually have a manager in a clubhouse call a guy in and sit him down and just say, hey man, what's going on? Like I'm noticing some things. Let's just talk. Let's just talk openly. That doesn't happen right now. And even in the workplace, I think you got a lot of younger workers coming into a workplace where they're feeling intimidated, that maybe some of these older workers like myself that have a long tenure in the corporate space, that have had successes under my belt. Maybe I'm intimidating. That I want that younger worker to now have the ability to have some sort of checkup, mentally, like, hey, how's everything going? Bridge the gap between the older community of the workforce and the younger community of workforce that maybe needs a little bit more nurturing, and the older workforce that's more hard and just get your job done. That needs to soften up a little bit. We need to open our hearts up a little bit more and help these younger generations come through and deal with things and teach them, right? It's all about teaching and education as well. So I love what you're doing at Milk and Honey. I'd love to, support the heck out of that and be a voice there. I know from Walking Tall, any way we can support that effort as well. So it's a reciprocal, definition of just love, right? And how we're just trying to spread it more. So yeah, it's cool.
Well, yeah, what a great conversation. We could go on forever, I feel like, but we're going to move on to other things throughout our day. But again, I wanted just to say thank you, Dr. LaRosa. Thank you, Todd. And most importantly, thank you, KT, for joining us this week. It's been a hell of a lot of fun. It's been enlightening. Congrats to all you're doing. Thank you for being here with us. And I want to invite listeners to tune in next week. We'll welcome another guest, Mr. Ian Hill. If you don't know who Ian Hill is, Ian is one of the nation's top community activists, and this go around, he's taking his efforts to the suicide prevention lane, where he's striving to become the first 50-year-old man to play Division I college football. We can't wait to hear more about his story and what he's doing to prevent suicide amongst men in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. So please tune in next week where we get to meet Ian Hill, hear all about what he's doing, how he's striving to become a football player. And before we sign off, KT, we usually say one more thing before we go, and we want you to lead us in that. So go ahead, man.
Walk tall.
Walk tall, baby. Walk tall.
Walk tall.
All right, everybody, have a great week.
Appreciate it, guys.
We'd like to thank our sponsor, The Balance Project. Check them out at www.thebalance-project.org. Thank you so much for being a proud supporter of the Walking Tall movement.